That'll work. Yes, always a challenge. Well, welcome to the September Facilities Committee meeting. We have a couple things on the agenda and look forward to good discussions. Here in the boardroom is Ms. Karen Carter, Vice Chair Haggerty, and myself. And currently remotely participating is Board Member Scott. And that is all I see so far online for the board members. We'll begin today's agenda with the minutes. Ms. Carter recognized that there is one typo, noting that there were some emailed questions that I asked. They were questions from Ms. Scott instead of Ms. Carter. So if we can get that corrected, I missed that as well. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Thank you for catching that, Ms. Carter. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July meeting.
I move that we adopt the corrected minutes as previously noted.
And a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. All right. Today we really have two things on the agenda. We're going to look at the schematic design for Swift Creek Elementary School and then get a broader project update for the projects that are part of the capital improvement plan related to the bond that will be coming up on the November ballot. So let's go ahead and begin with the Swift Creek Elementary School schematic design.
Okay. Good afternoon, Superintendent Moore, Chair Martin, and members of the Facilities Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the schematic design for the rebuild of Swift Creek Elementary School. The decision to tear down the existing school and rebuild as a single building followed an exhaustive study and assessment by our design team. The assessment revealed deficiencies in building system and envelope, building codes and accessibility violations, and an inability to incorporate current curriculum standards. The rebuilt school building and site will be designed to accommodate the same capacity as what is existing, 500 students. As this school has a history dating back to the early 1950s, it has strong ties with its neighborhood and community. Multiple visioning sessions were undertaken with staff, students, and neighbors of the school, which helped to create ownership of the new school. The following images are a synthesis of the information gathered from those visioning sessions.
As Elizabeth said, the Swift Creek School will be torn down and rebuilt, so the location is just a stone's throw away from here, down on Tryon Road. Rebuilding on the same exact site, 15.58 acres. The existing JUA and park facilities will be dissolved with the project, so we will have the entire 15.58 acres to work with. In front of you is the proposed site plan. Again, this is schematic. I already have a couple changes in my mind. I'll walk you through them with the project. Parents will be entering the school site off of Tryon Road. You see the building is the large white block. It looks like an upside-down capital L. It sits about 1/3 back on the site. I will tell you, just to orient you, north is pointing to the left, so it's opposite of the existing, it's turned 90 degrees. It's a little bit confusing. Tryon Road is here on the left side of the site. So the building sits about 1/3 of the way back, and that is to accommodate our carpool lines. You're getting used to those now. We're required to have quite a bit of length there to stack cars off of the public streets. The children arrive here at the front of the school. at the corner piece. And the K2 play area is also located in the front of the school between the building and Tryon Road. That's going to kind of soften that approach entry to the school. Because of the proximity to the vehicular drive, we're going to suggest fencing, of course. 3-5 is playing in the back of the school on the right-hand side of the site. So buses will be entering from Yates Mill Road here, where they currently have a driveway, going around the back of the school, dropping off here where the bus canopy will be. One of the suggestions I'm going to make to change this is to move, you see the turnaround bulb here for the buses, is to move it back to here so we can create more of an open play and open access to the play. What we are going to have to do, this is doubling as a fire lane. So we can extend that heavy-duty pavement off of the bus turnaround bulb, paint it for paved play, but then that does create more of a play experience and less of the vehicular use, and we kind of talked about that with E53 last month. So that's one of the elements I'm going to look into with the design team. As I said, 3-5 then has this large grassy play area, and stormwater is far to the right side of the site. We held our community meeting with the existing constituents of the school and neighbors last week. So we heard quite loudly from the parents that they would like to exit off of Yates Mill Pond like they do after they've dropped off from carpool. So what this diagram is showing you is the parents would make that snake to the front of the school and then continue back and exit onto Tryon Road. Well, they were explaining to us that the sheer volumes of traffic, the speed, most of them are actually would need to make a U-turn. So to exit where they currently do on Yates Store would be very helpful to them. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the town of Cary and review that with them and let them know if we can keep that existing driveway here at Yates Mill. What happens is they can exit here, use this left turn lane to make a U-turn and head back out to the signalized full movement intersection at Tryon. Just to make a couple more points on the site, the media center is here at the corner, at the entrance, so that is a more prominent feature of the building, so to really create a visual connection from the road, identify the school from the road, give it some presence from the road, because it does sit back a little bit far. And to talk more about the building, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth Wakeford.
Thank you, Alice. The diagram on the left here basically shows very diagrammatically what Alice was talking about, kind of the relationship between certain areas of the school with the outdoor area. The diagram on the right, however, shows the organization of classrooms and learning commons as neighborhoods. We know that, excuse me, collaboration at the earliest ages becomes a comfortable skill, which then can be applied throughout the students' lives. Spaces for collaboration, which are connected to the classrooms, provide opportunities for the children to engage in independent exploration while keeping the touch point of the classroom and the supervision by the teachers. This is super important in elementary school, as you can imagine. As we move up in the higher levels, we can separate them a little more from the classrooms, but the beauty of this scheme is that everything is very connected. Next slide. This plan is very simple and elegant. Wayfinding is very navigable by the children and begins with a clearly defined main entrance, which faces Tryon Road. Alice showed that. You can see where the cursor is. Two main corridors extend down the classroom wings and toward the stage, play, and dining areas. The administration area is positioned directly to the right as you enter the building. As Alice described, the media center holds a prominent position at the corner of the building at the main entrance, affording easy access to the school population as well as to the public for school and other events. As you've seen recently with other projects, the stage is open to both the play area and a large learning commons. That affords flexibility of space and the ability to accommodate larger groups to enjoy performances. Again, we're opening up the stage to either side to make everything much more flexible and adaptable to different arrangements. Issues of security are always foremost in our minds. The new project, as a single building versus multiple buildings, allows for better security on the campus. The single point of entry, the security vestibule with a badging station within it, is something that we've recently decided is a great idea, because any concern or alert flagged from badging will prevent a visitor from advancing further into the building. Classroom wings are compartmentalized with doors which are tied to the fire alarm and command center, and that can be shut and locked in the event of an interior threat to safety. All main entrance doors throughout the school will have card readers, and doors with direct access to outside from the classrooms, like pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and ECS, will have keyed locks at those outside doors. Multiple cameras, both interior and exterior, will be installed to cover all areas of the building and its exterior. Next one. And this is the second floor, also showing Learning Commons in yellow, just as it did in the first floor, and showing the neighborhoods of classrooms surrounding the commons, all with views to the commons. So just a two-story scheme, very simple. Classrooms are stacked on that one classroom wing. Next. This view of the front entrance from Tryon Road shows a very friendly facade with warm, simple materials and a scale appropriate for our smallest students. Transparency into the media center and the main entrances creates curiosity and invites engagement. This transparency also affords good visibility for staff and administration, facilitating eyes on the street. So again, a security measure. And finally, this is an early image showing the relationship between the stage and one of the learning commons. The one in this location will likely have some steps up to an elevated platform for both teaching purposes as well as viewing to the stage. As this is one of the larger learning commons in the school, it will nearly always be activated by multiple groups working collaboratively. But this gives you the flavor of the learning commons, exciting and fun and engaging. Thank you, and we'd like to open up for questions.
All right, the floor is open up for questions. Being a District 5 school, I'm very pleased to see the renovation coming along. Swift Creek has needed this for a long time. For those who may not remember, in terms of the site, we did purchase some additional land so that the new building is going to actually be able to more effectively use space than trying to fit it on the old site, which was just quite strained, particularly with the park and in the joint use agreement as well. So that gives us some of the more space, which is good. I guess I did have two questions. Thank you for noting the safety features. I think that's good. And we talked a lot at our last meeting at some of the keyed locks versus badged locks. So I heard you note that the exterior doors for the pre-K and K spaces will be keyed locks as opposed to badged. Curious as to the rationale behind that, and or what would the expense be to make them badged locks, because I think some of our question would, with the badged locks, you have a little bit more of an indicator as to whether or not it's ajar or not, and so yeah, I'd be interested in sort of the logic behind the keyed versus badged for those classroom-based doors, because they would potentially be the ones most likely to be propped
left
open.
And that's a very good point. And honestly, we discussed having them be card readers, and we would prefer that they are. This, when I mentioned it would be keys, depending on budget, they would be locked. We'd love to put card readers on every single door. If our budget allows, we would definitely do card readers on those. And that's a good point, because
What's the
there is
difference cost-wise? Do we have an estimate?
I want to say that it was around, when I talked to the individual that handles our card readers, he was saying it was about $2,000 for each individual card reader to purchase and install one.
Okay.
And also, those doors are exit doors out of the classrooms, so they're intended to be used that they go outside and then they continue outside to their play area, then come back around to one of the doors that will have a card reader on it to get into the building. This is when they come into the building, they'll stop by the restroom, they'll stop and get some water, and then they go back to their classrooms.
That adds to some of the challenge, right? Because if they're intended to be exit-only doors, that gives even more of an incentive to say, hey, let me put a prop in, because if I need to go back and
Right.
get, my water bottle, my backpack, my jacket, yeah.
And that's through training with the
Right.
school staff to really put it in and say, these need to stay closed at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, and $2,000 per card reader is not insignificant, because we're talking, I didn't count, but over a dozen doors.
Doors.
Yeah. 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 So if the budget allows it, I think that would be great. I mean, again, it's one of those things we need to keep communicating to our funding colleagues. The other question I had, looking at the design, and for Swift Creek, the students are used to navigating a maze
Oh, yes.
to try to get around the current school. But I was struck particularly on the second floor that it looked like the youngest children were at the farthest end of the wing, and the older children, so grade 5 was closest to the core stair, and I guess the second graders were down at the farthest wing. Just thinking about mobility for the students, is there a logic in potentially reversing those? Because it strikes me that so if you're going to go to lunch, that it strikes me it'd be easier for the second graders to just go down the stairs down to the cafeteria and not have the second graders have to go across the third, fourth, and fifth space to get down there. So I just was curious as to the logic of that, and might it make sense to sort of reverse the order?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I know that consideration of where the K2 playground was part of that decision, getting them close to that end so they can just
sure.
go outside to the front of the building and be at their playground. But yes, we can certainly look at that, maybe switching the ends. Absolutely.
I mean, close to the playground does make sense. So, I mean, there's multiple logics.
Right.
There are, yeah.
Yeah, but I was just curious when I hadn't thought about the playground. I was thinking about the internal spaces. Other comments or questions? Mr. Haggerty?
Again, I really appreciate all the details that you highlighted, particularly about the security features that went in and the very conscious efforts you made to incorporate those into the design. Really, these are just some more general questions, and I know that when we go into next year and we look at our capital improvement program and some of the assumptions we make in terms of like our standard facilities design, we've talked about having some flexibility, like in our cafeterias and our kitchens, to where if we were ever to make the move to go back to dishwashers, we'd have the ability to easily retrofit, or to help some of our schools that are interested in composting, or like disposing of their solid waste, and just making sure we have that flexibility built in there. It might be premature at this point, but is any of that flexibility being worked into these designs?
Yes.
They are. They are, yes. We have a recycling area that we've told all our designers, this could very well become a dishwashing room, in which case we would put recycling in a closet nearby or something. So those things are always, in flux, considering those alternatives.
Wonderful. I appreciate that.
Well, I might note the location is also great, because it's there at the south end of the site, which has easy access to. I mean, there are places where you could easily see if you wanted to even do some exterior composting would be possible.
Do it right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I mean, I guess the other question is a broader question, not limited to this one, but one day we'll talk about like photovoltaics and solar panels and the ability to work them into design, but we won't do that this afternoon. So I really appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Double check online here. Don't see any questions. I do appreciate, too, addressing the stacking for the carpool. Again, people familiar with Swift Creek know the challenge of the current stacking, which is along Tryon Road. That's a very busy road. And again, responding to the parent concerns about being able to exit onto Yates Mill. Because it would be difficult if all of the exit was onto Tryon, because many people would have to make a U-turn at that light. That's much more precarious than if we can maintain the Yates Mill exit. So
Yes.
I look forward to seeing that work out as well. All right, I think we need a motion to approve and go on to the next step.
Yes,
Please.
Do I hear such a motion?
Sorry, I'll make a motion to approve schematic design and move forward.
We have a motion and a second to approve the schematic design for Swift Creek Elementary School. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. We're ready to move forward.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next item on our agenda is looking at the projects for the 24 and 25 capital improvement plan. We've talked about this a fair amount in trying to arrange what all should go into that capital improvement plan. But Mr. Haggerty and I thought that it would be useful to sort of go through what all is coming up as we approach the vote for the bond. And I'll say it now, and I'll probably say it again at the end of the presentation. As we'll see, the bond funding really is the cheapest way to fund the building program that needs to be done no matter what. So we have to do it. The question is, what's the most effective and economically responsible way to do that? And bond funding definitely is the way to do that. Not only is it the best access to capital, but it also spreads out the building needs not only to the current residents, but to future residents who will be moving in, so we let growth help cover some of the cost of the renovation. So we need to know that information for the bond that will be on the ballot this November. So, Douglas?
Very good. Good afternoon to everybody. Good to see you all again this afternoon. So, as Dr. Martin alluded to, we're here today to highlight what's going to be happening in the 24-25 years of the bond that'll be upcoming on the ballot in just a matter of a few weeks. And we're talking about things that'll be on there in the form of design and construction and our other funding elements. So let's just run real quickly. We'll talk about what we'd like to hit today. We'll do a bond summary again. We'll share that with you. We'll talk specifically about the funding items in those 2 years, 24, 25. And then we'll shift gears a bit. We'll talk a little bit about our site challenges that we face on some of our projects, as well as building challenges. As Dr. Martin and others on the committee have referenced in previous meetings, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are other schools and buildings out there in this district that do need help, and so we want to bring light to that as well. So we intend to spend a few minutes talking about that. So, and then, of course, take any questions that you might have. All right. So in this current slide, this gives you the bond breakdown that we've referenced. Note from top to bottom that this is a $530.7 million item. And as you go from top to bottom in fiscal years 24 and 25, you will see $274 million in the new schools line item. You will see $92 million for school replacement, $256 million under program requirements, and then $42 million in the program contingency and program management, bringing that total to $664.7. Now, you'll further look down at the county funding piece. We know we're very fortunate to have that partnership with our county partners, and you'll see that we've arrived at 530.7 because 134 of that equation is a cash piece. okay? So that's how we've arrived at 530.7 that will be on the ballot in just a matter of weeks. Next slide, please. In this next slide, what we've done here is we've drilled down a little bit further, and we have taken a couple moments to show you specifically the schools that are going to be included in those years, 24, 25. You see that we have a total of 5 new schools, and then we have 8 schools that are under the replacement category. Good balance there. And then the funding buckets that are in the program requirements section are all of the parts and pieces that we have in our capital improvement plan annually. I won't read each one of them, but as you're well aware, we start with our life cycle building and all the way down to our SNAP and PRIMP programs that each have their individual funding elements. And again, that is part of this bond that we're highlighting. In this slide, what we've done here is we've honed in a little bit deeper, and we've specifically looked at the schools that are within those 2 years, 24 and 25, and taken some time to share some important details about the project types, the geographic location, and then the current estimate for the commencement of construction, and then its substantial completion. So at the top, of course, you see our combo, which is the combo middle and high school. Of course, being a new project in the town of Morrisville, that will be coming with a start of next spring, in fact, okay? And then completion, looking at that to be substantial 2 years following spring 25. As you look down, you'll see elementary schools, Pleasant Plains and Bowling Road, which are both new. Pleasant Plains and Apex, Bowling Road and Fuquay Arena, both looking to start those projects in the early part of 24. And then, as they're elementary schools, we have the ability to turn those around by the following spring. At this point, estimated for May 25. We look further down to Lockhart Elementary School being in Nightdale. That's a little bit further down. That's with a construction start in early 26. Again, given the fact that it's an elementary school, we have the ability to turn that around by the following spring. And then as you look further down, the same thing applies in Brentwood, in Raleigh. Athens Drive High School, also in Raleigh, with the ability to replace and renovate by the following spring of 27. We then go down to Briarcliff Elementary School. That's in Cary, of course. That's a later start. That's a summer 26 start with a complete at near the end of November of 27. Then we look at Ligon, which of course is in Raleigh. That's a 26 start summer with, again, a late 27 finish. And then we've got H14, which is a new high school. West Cary Morrisville, which is, again, new. That's a spring 26. Keeping in mind that's a high school, so that's a 2-year construction schedule. That's why we're looking at spring 28 for that completion. And then finally, of course, is Washington Elementary School, which, of course, Raleigh. And then given the fact that it's elementary, we're able to do a start in later 27 with completion estimated in early 29. For the next few slides, we've honed in specifically on some of the slides here. We wanted to show you all a little bit more information, and these are the next round per se that are coming the soonest. So we wanted to give you a little bit more. We wanted to show you some overheads, some renderings if we had them at this point. This, of course, is our combo. And as I noted, Morrisville is the location. This gives you some nice data on the teaching spaces, the student capacity, and then, of course, the estimated dates for completion. Next, of course, is Bowling Road. Again, this gives you a bit of an appreciation for the overhead for the site, where we are, of course, in Fuquay Arena. And again, its size and some key data on the teaching spaces, the student capacity, and the estimated completion dates. And then finally, of course, we have Pleasant Plains Elementary School in Apex, again, an elementary school, giving you some key data on the student and the teacher information, and then the estimated construction start and estimate completion dates. On this next slide, what we've done, and you've seen these in previous presentations, where we take a map and try to give some geographic significance to it to give you the ability to sort of see big picture where these locations are in our county. I know what strikes me is that we're seeing growth and we're seeing need across our county, and I think this demonstrates balance, that we're paying attention to north, south, east, and west in our county, and showing you exactly over the next few years where this bond, should it be approved, where it would be focused. And before we move into the site and the building piece, I'll pause there for a moment and ask you all if there are any questions specific to the bond piece.
Thank you, Douglas. I appreciate all the information, and I think the map's very helpful to let people see where all of these new projects are coming. Where we're going to have renovations, again, we have a large number of renovations in the bond package, and I think that's important. Dr. Martin has talked many times about just with the life cycle of our schools, how we need to be replacing and renovating a lot of these schools on a much more regular basis. Have we given thought to where the different schools will swing to, where the students will attend while this is going on, or is that still?
You're like reading my mind, because what I was going to add is we probably need an additional column there that shows what the swing space is, because people who look at this presentation and see it are going to want to know, well, what happens to us when that happens? So that would probably be additional information that should be read my mind. Literally.
Great question, and we'd be happy to follow on that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
No, I'm just very excited to see the projects, see the construction dates, and I know that the substantial completion is always an estimate, but it's good to have those dates on
It is.
actually on paper. So thank you.
And we'll be gentle and stress estimated.
Ms. Carter.
Yeah, I just had a question for those who might be wondering about how it's prioritized for the construction start date, for like how that was determined. If that makes sense.
So when we look at that and when we review our CIP each year, we look at each year and we look at the dollar. The bottom line doesn't change in terms of the total dollars that we are able to receive funding from the county. And then as we look at that and we slot each of the projects in, we then, at the beginning of each year, usually February or March, we send a draft to the county and they run that through their debt model to help us understand exactly if it will work, so to speak. And then, of course, there are always adjustments depending on what they have going on in a particular year. Understandably, projects that are larger in size and larger in dollar value might need to be moved to different years based on their value. If we have the ability to slot a project in earlier where we feel like it certainly is critical that it be done, we're absolutely doing that. But there are other factors that come into play as we look at each year.
Sure. So a couple things. I noticed that on slide 4, Wendell Elementary School is listed, but did not make it on the list of construction start and completion dates.
Okay.
You might want to add that and also add that to the map, because that's another school in Eastern Wake.
Yeah, that is on the back end of our 7 years.
I remember it being discussed. I don't remember exactly where it lands.
Right, so with Wendell, we have design funding in 25. Okay. And this is an example of when
Yeah.
we've got to move pieces around to make the years come to work.
So that probably didn't get on the list
It
of
didn't.
number 5 because it's design and not, we want it, the start date will be later than that.
It is, in fact, because the construction, the dollars at this moment are slotted in for 28.
Right.
So
Okay.
is the, with regards to what's in the 7-year plan, is the chart ordered by when construction starts as the 7-year window or when substantial completion happens in the 7-year window versus when design funding starts in the 7-year window? Right, 'cause
Well,
there's
design
those-
funding's
those are
not-
3
yeah.
different milestones.
Design's not on here at all.
Right.
Which,
So I'm just saying, what is
Yeah.
it that gets it in the 7-year? The construction start or substantial completion?
It would be the construction start. Yeah.
If 28, so when is Wendell start?
When the dollars are FY '28 for Wendell.
that's the beginning of design dollars.
No, if you look at the 7-year
That's-
CIP,
That's what I thought. They-
So would that be on here if start is when you, yeah, I guess.
Well, see, that's my question, right? Because this is 24.
7-year plan is not the same as when the dollars come.
Right, but this is a 24,
Right.
25.
You're right.
And all of the renovation replacements start in 26 at the earliest.
right. So this one, I think we would probably call Wendell an outlier in that we're showing it because there are design dollars in 25, okay? However, the construction dollars don't hit until 28, so it's much later. And again, that could shift. That was that's in our current approved plan.
Yeah.
But as we look at it each year, it could move up, it could move out, just depending on what the needs are in that particular year.
Okay.
Okay?
Ms. Carter?
Is that the same case? Is it only designed for North Garner? Because they're also not on the list.
North Garner.
They're
yes.
on 4, but not on.
They're on page 4,
or
but not on page
4,
5.
but not on page 5.
Right. Yeah. Correct. In North Garner, we're showing design dollars actually in 23, and then we have construction dollars in 25 and 26.
Okay, so North Garner should definitely be on the chart of page 5.
Wendell Elementary, that should also be on the renovation and replacement list on 4, not on the new school list?
Right, because that's a reno replace.
Well, actually, Wendell's going to be at a new location. That might be why that's not.
That is true.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
But they will have to relocate
While there's
because
construction
it's an
going on.
existing school.
No, they will
No, or
stay
they
in
won't
their
have to
current
relocate.
school.
They're gonna stay.
They won't have to relocate because it's at a different site.
It's a new
Right.
site.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And it will be, Ms. Scott, will it not also expand capacity? Is that my remembering?
That's what had been discussed. That's right.
Yeah. I see your hand is up. Do you have another question you'd like to add?
I do, but I
Go ahead.
appreciate my colleagues sort of asking them. That was just sort of, I think, for anyone who might be looking at this and say, wait a minute, like Garner and Zebulon Middle School aren't on here, just to sort of highlight to people that this is just the early, this is not a comprehensive list. We're just looking at the early years of how the funding would be used.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yes, that's
Right.
correct.
So, okay, that's making sense. So the title of the slide for 5 is 24-25 bond funded,
Yes.
not 7-year plan.
Yeah.
Right, the 7-year plan information we get later. It's just, having different schools on slide 4 and slide 5, I think adds some confusion, so I think that'll be good to clear some of that up. Somewhat related to that, just again to remind the public, we just talked about Swift Creek. That is funded under the current bond, as is Felton Grove High School, if my memory is correct. So
Yes.
those are construction projects. So we talked about schematic design in our July meeting for both Pleasant Plains and Bowling Road. We see them here, but they need dollars in the upcoming bond. But if my recollection is correct, please correct me, Felton Grove and Swift Creek are currently funded, even though we just approved the schematic design for
Yes.
Swift Creek today.
That's a true statement, as well as one that's not in here but has been previously funded, and the current bond is Hilltop Needmore.
And Hilltop Needmore, that's right.
Okay? So
Yeah.
just be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
And
So-
then, Dr. Martin, I don't know when this is appropriate, or if you were going to mention, if you happen to see, there was an email from Ms. Kushner that was sent to you, and she copied me about her question.
Go, please read it. I did not see that yet because it wasn't in my early morning email.
Okay, and now I have to go through many different tabs here. I think it was somewhat related to this presentation, but she said her main feedback would be to consider a PRIMP or other project for Hunter Elementary School to have an arts wing to promote their magna programs. Given the new building Fuller now has, I think it is appropriate to consider how Hunter remains equitable as the other AIG GT magnet elementaries for the district. So again, I'm not sure where that question or comment would have fallen, because I know, or would have fallen, and I know PRIMP isn't on the agenda, but I think that's somewhat related to how we use funding. So I just wanted to make sure that was shared.
Thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, that's a continuing issue that we need to address, a neighboring school kind of issues, and PRIMP is one place to do that. So that's definitely something to look into for Hunter. I mean, I think about, as we get the new middle school in Morrisville, that's going to increase the concerns about West Cary. So we're going to have the same kind of issues. We already have those issues, but it's only going to elevate those issues. So I think this is one of those things that we talk about regularly, but we need to systematize it, I think, in our planning.
And I think this goes back to what we've talked about with like our rubrics and our scoring, right? I mean, I love Hunter Elementary School, but that doesn't mean that if PRIMP funding were to go to, just because Fuller had its renovation, that now that would suddenly put Hunter up at the top of the list when there's other schools that have been waiting for years for similar renovations. So while it's good to raise those concerns, I think we have to remember that we do have a lot of very objective criteria that we use to rate and rank these projects.
Well, and I think to this point, we have more developed that rating scheme for full renovations. We haven't done the same thing for PRIMP kind of projects, but I think this issue highlights the need for that same kind of process.
Yeah.
I know that, because I've had lots of conversations with Mark about this, that when we go through that whole process of ranking, we are trying to pay attention to those that don't make it onto the list but still have real needs. That's an issue that we've had historically. There were a lot of things that just never made it, which is why PRIMP got created in the first place. So I think you're just highlighting this continuing work that we need to do, and that's going to come up in some. Having looked at the slides, that's going to come up again in some of our ongoing discussion.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to chime in with that because, Mr. Haggerty, I totally agree with you. And I think Ms. Kushner was probably intentional when she was mentioning the arts wing, as with the exception of the art class, all of the other fine arts courses are in mobile units behind the school. So that's, I don't know of any other GT schools where that's the case, but I could be totally wrong. But I just wanted to share that I think that was her point. She was being intentional about sharing the arts piece.
Rather than the comprehensive whole school. Yeah.
Right. And again, I just want to highlight that's also why I think it is important to have someone from Fine Arts on that committee as they're going through and reviewing their rubrics, that we have someone who can represent Fine Arts as well.
All right, the other thing that I just think is important to highlight as we look at this is to remind both the board and the public that, when we look at the budget line, we see $92 million for school replacement in the 24-25 cycle. All of that replacement money is going to design. None of that yet will be construction funding. And so this just points to the continuing work that this board and the commissioners have to address, because $92 million is not going to renovate all these schools. That's the design money for that. And so subsequent bonds and subsequent appropriations are the expectation so that we can meet the needs of the 7-year plan. And I think it also points to, the challenge and the responsibility that we have as a board to make sure that we're looking down the road. Because it takes a couple years to design before you get the money to build. It takes a couple years to build, and so on. So this is an ongoing process, and every bond is both a action bond and a down payment bond, and that's really what we're looking at.
Okay.
Any further comments or questions? Okay,
All right.
continue.
With that, we'll move on. Okay. We are on slide 10 now. Okay. Project site challenges. So what we want to do here is take a few minutes and just highlight some of the things that we work through and review when we talk about the sites that we're looking at as we consider schools that need to move, schools that need to be relocated, et cetera. So we started with site accessibility issues, and these are some examples. Of course, we have neighboring communities. We have road improvements that need to occur, whether that's a DOT road or whether that's a local. We have issues on certain sites with wetlands, with stream crossings, environmental, and then, of course, we have easements on some of our sites that we need to address. And so these are all things that have to be considered and worked through when we're looking at our sites out there and we're forecasting and projecting forward. In that vein, we have important partnerships, relationships with our various municipalities, and with that comes many different types of joint use agreements and ILAs that are important. We have agreements with our partners to work together and have it be utilized for the benefit of both parties. As you can appreciate, though, that certainly requires a tremendous amount of coordination and working together to ensure that both parties can benefit. And it certainly can be challenging depending on the site. Environmental, we look at things like landfills and treatment plants, and I referenced wetlands and air quality, things that are real challenges at some of our sites. So as we consider future sites and we think about the fact that the time where you could go out there, and certainly it's harder as the sites get bigger, like when we look at our high schools and we say we need about 70 acres to be able to get a high school program on that site. The days of finding that where it's a flat green field and it's, quote, ready to go, not so much, especially for the bigger sites, right? Maybe not quite as complex for the smaller, but still very difficult. And so you can see some of the issues that we're faced with that we have to try to resolve. And when we look at our budgets, those come with dollar signs, right? Those come with activities that have to be done to get a site ready to go to build on. So we wanted to highlight some of these things. We look at that land quality, of course, the site development costs. You look at the topography, the conditions of the soil can be an issue. We have a site where we have a tremendous amount of rock that's going to need to be removed. All things that, as you can appreciate, add up. When we move on to the building challenges, and again, in doing some homework and some preparation for you all today, we thought it was important to note a couple of key pieces of information. When we look at our district and we're talking about the aging of our existing facilities. When we look at the raw square footage, approximately 25% of the buildings in the district are 30 years or older. Okay? When we look at the number of buildings, and not just at the square footage, but the number of buildings, and I think the current count is 203 of buildings in our district, there's about 38% of those buildings that are 30 years or older. So it brings back to the forefront, Dr. Martin and you all's points, that attention needs to be provided to those schools in our district that are in need of help. We thought it would be prudent to bring light to this. Some of the bigger ticket items that I think need a little bit of visibility here, and that was sort of the thinking as we come from top to bottom on this slide. We look at our building systems. We look at the HVAC, the heating, the ventilation and the air conditioning, the fire life and safety. These are the big ticket items, as we call it, like the bones of the buildings that really help our buildings run as efficiently as possible. And some of the challenges that we face, we're not talking about finishes here, right? We're talking about the systems, the roof, structural related items, doors and windows. And as you look at that 30-year, I think it's important to note that 30 years ago this year was when the Federal ADA Act went into law. Okay? So if a building was constructed prior to 92, it is going to have things that have been grandfathered in, that when you go out, if we do a major renovation and we get a permit approved, we are going to be required, and we should be, we are going to be required to update those items. And again, that comes with a cost. So that's just some perspective to keep in mind.
And just for clarification on the grandfathering, is the grandfathering when the permits are approved or when construction is completed?
As soon as the permits are approved, the approval is with the understanding that with that approval comes, you have to update your restrooms, you have to update your entrances,
Right.
the key components of the building where visitors or staff or students might need access in that manner. You must update them.
Okay. I was just thinking in terms of which schools are grandfathered and which weren't, which ones were completed before 92 and which ones might have been in the planning stages. And I just didn't know, who would get the grandfathering and who wouldn't.
Right.
But all of those that are 30-plus years old
They fall into that
would not
category.
be, they would have been grandfathered.
So if you
none
go
of
to
them
a-
would have, none of them would currently have ADA. Yeah.
Right. So if you
So any renovations to those schools then would be more extensive because it's
Right.
coming up to code. That's what I was wondering, where if schools, for example, like in the bond funding, we'd had the designs and schematics completed prior to passage of the ADA, but the school was not completed yet, would we have had to have gone back and then redone all the design and schematics to comply? Or if it had been approved, would those have made it in? I'm just trying to think in terms of numbers of schools and how large a problem it's going to be, that's all. And you wouldn't have to have an answer today, but just.
No, I mean, that's going to be for the ones that are less than 30 now, but will be more than 30 in a couple of years.
True.
I think I remember, but I cannot say authoritatively, I think I remember that if the approvals were already through, the approvals did not have to retroactively go back and meet the law, but I can't.
I've got a couple in that window in my area that I was thinking
Yeah.
about, so.
Yeah. But any new renovation is going to require,
It'll trigger that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those issues, vegetables, in schools, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, we want to bring light to some of those challenges that we face with our existing schools. We want you all to be aware of, as we discussed in our previous meeting, the market volatility that we're working through right now. The volatility has not leveled out at this point. It continues to go on. As you're aware, when we were in front of you last time, we talked about the best and the most unique approach that we can try to hold our schedules and to combat the cost increases are to do some early release packages. Okay, we talked about Felton Grove High School, talked about Hilltop Needmore Road. What we wanted to share with you this afternoon specifically was an update about Hilltop Needmore Road. We did early package release. Those were sent out to bid. We were in receipt of five trades. We did structural steel, electrical, HVAC, roofing, and site. The majority of those packages that came in were over budget. Now, electrical and structural steel came in under, and so by virtue of coming in under, and because of one of the items that we talked about last time were the extended and significant lead times, so we're trying to get ahead of those. We're going to proceed with those. In that particular project, as you'll recall, as that's in Fuquay-Varina, the town is building its senior center on that property as well. And so we're going to be looking at opportunities. That was one of the packages that came in over. So we're going to be looking at that, and we're going to be looking at opportunities to bring that down, and then likely in a matter of the next few weeks be rebidding that. The others that came in over, the plan with that, after talking with our team and our partners, is that we're going to be bidding those with the remainder of the trades packages that are going to be bid. And what we're looking to do is to do that in Q1 of this coming year. The thought process being that by giving that a period of about 4 months, we give the opportunity to allow the market maybe to calm down a bit, okay? As we know, there are no guarantees in that forecast. We believe that it might. And so as a result, the original plan for that school was a spring 24. And because of some of these conditions that we've talked about, we believe that a lot of this risk that was out there, one of the things that is real is that when you do these early packages, there is risk because the drawings aren't permitted yet. Okay, so by making a move toward early next year, they'll be permitted, and that will reduce some of that risk that was present even as recent as when we talked at the last meeting. And we believe, we've talked extensively with Mr. Carrozza. He is comfortable in an agreement that he needs the new population for students and staff by spring, summer of 25. This shift will allow us to mitigate more of this risk that we're dealing with right now. And so that will allow us to try to manage this right now. And I think time is our ally. Making this move decreases our risk and gives us a better opportunity for better economics. So we wanted to share that as well with you all. And with that, happy to take any questions on that second part of the presentation.
Questions, comments? Yeah, I think it is quite straightforward. It's the ongoing discussions that this board has been having, and obviously the continuing board will need to also address. I think this clearly lays out the need for the current bond. It is by no means in excess. As we just heard from the Hilltop Needmore, everything's coming in over budget. So we need those dollars, and the voter-approved bond is the way to maximize those dollars. And thank you for highlighting the square footage needs. I think that's sobering to recognize that today 30% of our buildings are 30 years old, and that is 30 years old without renovation. We have some buildings that are much older than that have had major renovation. That's okay. We're talking about 30 years old, think about the number of little feet and little hands that have tracked through the halls think about your house being 30 years old with 500, 800 children going through it and no major renovation in 30 years. And no, that's not going to happen. So that's what we need to be looking at. And 38% of 203 is can't do my math quite that fast, but that's a lot of schools. We're not going to be able to. Our goal is to do the major renovation by 40 years. Based on the 7-year plan of today, that means a school that's 30 years is going to be 37 before it gets onto the 7-year plan, which takes it almost to 40. So we're going to need to, I think this is one of the big challenges for this board and the Board of Commissioners going forward, is to very seriously put some plans in place to how to deal with this, because this is a challenge that's not going to go away and is not going to be met with the current funding structure. That's not to point any fingers. That's simply saying, growth has been occurring in Wake County heavily since the 1990s, and the 1990s were 30 years ago, soon to be 40 years ago. And that's, investment is not a one and done thing. It's an ongoing thing, and that becomes, I think, the heavy lift, and it's time that we really need to start making those plans. So thank you for that presentation and that information.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. On our agenda, too many windows open here, I believe is any new business. I think here we might want to highlight, we talked about the field trip.
Yes. Very good. So there is a field trip that has been planned. The county has requested a schools tour, and that is going to take place on Monday, the 26th of September. And there are going to be 3 schools on that tour. It's going to be starting with Fuller Elementary School from 9 to 10:30 a.m. that morning. Then we'll move to Brentwood Elementary School from 11 to 12:30 p.m. that afternoon. And then we will finish with West Millbrook Middle School, and that will be from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. that afternoon.
And how will board members be involved? Are we going to need signups? Are we going to?
I thought we had a student achievement committee meeting at 3, and then for those of us who have jobs, I teach, I can't really now be involved in any of them. So it's very disappointing to schedule it because the last one is at 2:30, and I believe we have student achievement at 3 that day. I'm pretty confident. So that one's out for the whole board if they're going to be doing student achievement, which is a pretty important meeting. And then the other 2 are both at times, I could pick unpaid day, but that's what it would take for me to be able to participate at all.
You're right in raising that concern. These were dates chosen largely. It was requested, even though we've talked about it a lot, this was requested for and chosen by the commissioners and the core team. And Mr. Haggerty and I have tried to make sure that our board members know about it and can join where possible. This clearly cannot be the only one. We've expressed in the past a little bit of concern that only one of the 3 schools is one in need of renovation. It's great to see what is delivered, and I know that's part of what the commissioners wanted to see. But I think from a strategic perspective, it is at least as important for us to demonstrate the upcoming need. So, your concern is correct and well-founded. I myself will not be able to participate in all of them. This cannot be the last needs to, it needs to be an ongoing effort. Those who can participate, should people just show up 10 minutes before? What's sort of the
If
plan?
there are those that would like to attend, they can certainly reach out to me, or they can reach out to Elizabeth Sharps to let us know. People are providing their own transportation, so they are going to be coming directly to those school sites via their own transportation. If there are any questions, if they're happy to reach out to me. And to your point, this is not the one and only. Understand your point, Ms. Carter. And we'll certainly work to schedule others in the future.
Well, in fairness, we had talked about it at the July meeting, and I just wanted to reinforce that it's happening and when it's happening. To what extent is this the core team, and to what extent is this the commissioners? Do we know?
I mean, there's
My
certainly
understanding
been-
it was initially the core team, but
There are a handful of those from the core team on county side that are going to be coming. I've not spoken personally to any commissioners. They were absolutely invited like you all are. They certainly could be coming. We can certainly reach out to county and ask. But there are approximately 4 or 5 people on the core team from county side that requested this and will be coming.
So if I understand, I mean, this was mostly a staff meeting, and brought up the staff wanted to talk to, county staff wanted to talk to our staff and coordinate, and then I think we had talked about the idea of the benefit of board members or commissioners seeing it, but the actual event, I think, has really been sort of just staff-driven.
that, as I understand the intent. I think in the past, we did one elected to elected tour, and I think it will be wise to do that again, particularly as we think strategically about how are we going to address this 38% of our buildings are 30 years old without major renovation, right? That's going to require very different thinking, and that's going to require a field trip, I believe, that's very different than just looking at these 3 schools, two of which are new renovations. So this is a ongoing work to be continued, but I just wanted to make sure people knew what was happening and that they can participate.
Okay? Thank you.
Any other new business? Anybody like to raise?
Only that, we've talked about new business, several topics that we'd like to address. I know we're coming toward the end of this year, this calendar year, and this term on the board. So if there's topics that we've addressed, concerns that were brought up, remember we did that prioritization of what member interests are. Maybe we can take some time and sort of revisit that, and that can help us set the agenda for the coming year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've addressed most of the things that we talked about before. I think there's really the ongoing needs to really focus on some sustainability efforts. We haven't even completely, I think, developed a good concept of what we mean by sustainability. Everything from composting and washing dishes in the cafeteria to photovoltaics or other aspects. We have talked about sustainability in things like site planning and placement, maximizing light, dealing with parking, dealing with wetlands.
Right.
But this is ongoing work that I think. So I think the sustainability issues are the main thing that are sort of the big question
Still
mark
pending, yeah.
that's out there. We've talked a lot about getting some update on the joint use agreements. As board members, you got an email with sort of a listing of them, but it's probably recommended that we'll do it's recommended that would be done in the next calendar year with a new board, so that people are aware of the joint use agreements. That's, I think, very important going forward with any construction projects. So I think those are the main outlier things. Of course, still very unresolved are swing space. We do sort of one-off, which is what we have to work with now. But that's been an ongoing discussion. Should we have, specific swing spaces? The whole prioritization issue is something that is, I think we've addressed, but is ongoing work, as we just mentioned today. Even prioritization of some of the primp issues. So I think these are some of the ongoing things that will give a good start to think about what can be addressed.
I think so. And I think we had a good structure in the committee over the past 2 years. You know, we've addressed a lot of issues. We've sort of taken up topics. It hasn't just been reacting to new buildings and new design. And I think we've been very intentional in how we've approached things and let members explore things. And so, you know, thinking ahead, we know that no matter what happens this November, we'll have at least 5 board members who will be brand new. And you know, the idea that what we had here was a good model, it'll be good to present to everyone again how we prioritize our building projects, you know, how we, you know, what the CIP is, how we budget, and just really, I think we can take the template of what we've done and cover a lot of ground that maybe we've covered together as a committee, but it'll be really important to cover with a new group next year.
No, I think you're right. I think there'd be real value in some more 101s, as well as some strategic planning, as well as the specific decision-making.
And so I think, you know, and I know Ms. Scott, she's online, and Ms. Carter is here. We've got other members who aren't able to join us today, but if we can just sort of reach out and see what people thought, you know, were valuable, you know, what they sort of got the most about, that can help us in our prioritization and planning for next year's committee.
To kind of piggyback on that a little bit, not only did I find all the 101s helpful that we had in a breakdown of how everything works, I heard from folks in the community that it was helpful, because there's a lot of, because you don't know. Because there's nowhere for them to go and look. What does this mean? And the biggest feedback is around, that I've received at least, is around that rubric and prioritization and who does that, you know, where that really goes and how it kind of morphs and changes and the lists change and, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it's helpful to be able to present that in an open meeting so that folks, not just board members, but the community understands, and more of that type of information is helpful. And the sustainability, like, I would really like that addressed kind of with also the piece that we've mentioned with other things as well, about how can we come up with something district-wide that folks know, our staff, if they are trying to get grants or trying to get like solar panels. I've had several. And how can we help? Because there's other staff, you know, that have done a lot of that work and have a lot of knowledge about these resources, and how can we connect that as a district-wide so it's more accessible for all of our schools, not just certain schools. And so I think it's, you know, how to spread it and not necessarily pass that cost on to taxpayers, but utilize community resources and businesses who might be willing to donate.
And just to piggyback on that, you know, there's the Green Schools Partnership and some of the events that they've had, I know that we've all gone to, and that can be very useful in connecting different schools to different resources out there, and that's maybe something, you know, we can highlight in committee or just even in some of our other staff work. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, I think the last thing on our formal agenda then today is the 3-month forecast.
Yes. So, of course, we were with you today. We did our Swift Creek Elementary School schematic design, and important to note that that is the final schematic presentation that will be done this calendar year. There will be more to come next year, but just make a note that that concludes that for this calendar year. There was discussion for the October meeting of having a 101 for JUAs. Based on what Dr. Martin said, it sounds like maybe that's going to be pushed a little bit to perhaps the January meeting. So just know that in terms of October, at least at the moment, there were not a lot of other topics of significance beyond that we had discussed bringing to you all. So I think it would be prudent to talk about whether we should be meeting, whether we hold an October meeting.
Yeah, I think that is a point of discussion that we need to figure out, because we had talked about the joint use agreements, and then, as you note, the PTA volunteering. There are just a number of things that PTAs can do: spreading mulch, weeding flower beds, pressure washing sidewalks, these kinds of things. You know, some of it people know about, some people don't know about. If your PTA wants an activity, who do you call to get mulch delivered, kind of things. So we just thought maybe a PTA 101 could be useful. Probably not sufficient for a full meeting as the primary topic agenda. So, I mean, November, we, as you'll probably get to, I believe Mr. Croza has some things related to student assignment that he would like to bring, but we might, so stay tuned. There may or may not be an October meeting. I don't like to hold meetings just for the sake of holding meetings, but if there is important material to put on the agenda, we'll do that for October.
Right, so more to come on that one. And then, of course, you see next week is our final board meeting for the month of September, and you will see an ILA agreement with the town of Apex for H12, and then CMAR delivery method for our major projects, which are two highlighted items on that upcoming meeting next Tuesday. And we will work to continue to populate additional items of significance for the October meetings that will be coming. And then, as Dr. Martin mentioned, once a decision's made about the October Facilities Committee meeting, that will certainly be communicated, and then we will look to see what topics are out there that need to be covered for the November meeting. Any questions?
All right. Thank you. Well, that covers the agenda. Thank you for a good discussion today. Thank you, presenters. And with that, the September Facilities Committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.